In this pod slice summary of the Huberman Lab podcast, Dr. Paul Conti and Dr. Andrew Huberman delves into the topic of healthy relationships, which includes romantic, interpersonal, professional, familial, and the relationship with oneself. The conversation extends the framework established in the first and second episodes about the psychology of self and mental health. They shed a deeper light on defining a successful relationship, discussing bonds, including healthy and trauma bonds, challenges faced within relationships, and the role of power dynamics, anxiety, and boundaries. Highlighting that relationships are interconnected with one's conscious and subconscious mind, Dr. Huberman and Dr. Conti explore a holistic perspective on relationships. They share strategies on cultivating healthy relationships grounded in understanding oneself, emphasizing the need for agency and gratitude observed as verbs signaling action. These concepts, they note, become the pinnacle of one's understanding of personal health and the springboard for engaging in positive interactions. The conversation further dissects the underlying structures that compose our sense of self and therefore affect our relationships, pointing to the unconscious and conscious mind. The unconscious mind houses defense mechanisms and character structures which can significantly influence relationships, while the conscious mind is accustomed to functions such as awareness, attention, behavior, hopes, and aspirations. In conclusion, Dr. Huberman and Dr. Conti encourage listeners to evaluate themselves closely, not in the typical sense of self-inventory, but through a map of self. Simultaneously, they underscore the attainability of healthier states in relationships by examining these underlying pillars. However, they clarify that no one person does this perfectly all the time, and that recognition and acceptance of this are crucial in directing efforts towards positive engagements. To improve one's relationship with the self and others, Dr. Conti emphasizes the need to embody agency and gratitude in the approach to oneself, others, and the world. This, he states, entails valuing truth, understanding, and exploration. The duo concludes with the understanding that all matters concerning self can align with the 2 pillars and 10 cupboards within them, emphasizing that we all have methods to understand and make things better. In their exploration of healthy relationships, Dr. Andrew Huberman and Dr. Paul Conti emphasize the importance of compatibility, which extends beyond common interests, educational background, or shared experiences. They argue that what truly matters is the generative drive within each individual and how these drives align with one another. Dr. Conti explains that the compatibility of generative drives, as opposed to common interests or background, creates a more sustainable foundation for a relationship. These internal drives, they note, are much more significant in determining whether 2 individuals will be compatible in a relationship. The alignment of agency and gratitude, 2 essential components of one's generative drive, is what facilitates the open-mindedness, humility, and interest that allow 2 people to connect on a deeper level, regardless of their individual interests or skills. This perspective redefines the idea of like-mindedness in a relationship. Instead of referring to shared hobbies or preferences, like-mindedness becomes about shared values resonating within individual generative drives. Also, being like-minded in this sense requires the presence of openness, humility, and empowerment, where one doesn't necessarily need to be good at or knowledgeable about the partner's interests, but has the curiosity to explore them. Dr. Huberman and Dr. Conti further suggest that geographical or career-based proximities, which often facilitate meeting partners, might skew our understanding of compatibility. They hint at the potential benefits of online dating, which can overcome traditional cultural or geographical barriers, allowing people with aligned generative drives to connect. In broadening the conversation's scope, Dr. Conti also speaks to how interconnectedness and ongoing learning enhances our lifespan and health span. He underscores the importance of maintaining a strong connection with the world around us, continuing to learn and explore, as these are indicators of a more robust lifespan and increased overall well-being. Overall, their discussion urges us to reevaluate what we perceive as compatibility, highlighting internal generative drives' relevance in forming and sustaining truly healthy relationships. In the in-depth discourse, Drs. Huberman and Conti delve into the intricacies of generative drives as they shape not only individual growth and introspection, but also interpersonal relationships, primarily romantic. They posit that the generative drive, which fuels Our inner yearning to create, understand, and grow underpins our unconscious mechanisms in selecting partners. The potency of generative drive influences our capacity to seek new learning, to understand, and to establish an enhanced life for ourselves and the world around us. Its presence is reflected in our proactive decisions, reflections, and actions. As Dr. Conti interestingly points out, it is the set of potentials within us that are being actualized through the verbs of agency and gratitude. In reshaping the traditional perception of relationships, they hint that expression and levels of generative drives may serve as an underlying factor for compatibility. A similar level of generative drive in partners could foster healthier and harmonious relations. Moreover, they note that the manifestation of these generative drives reflects more on the lived experiences rather than the transient states of pleasure or aggression. However, as Dr. Conti elaborates, it's not the act itself, like watching Netflix, that symbolizes passivity or anti-generative inclinations, but the context and intention behind it. Whether it's being used as an escape mechanism or a conscious tool to ignite discussions, ponder upon narratives, or even generate one's poetry makes a difference. Further exploring relationships, they also challenge some common axioms like opposites attract and the ideal of finding someone similar. They raise critical questions about these contrived notions driving our relationship choices, underlining the importance of self-assessment and aspiration for self-improvement in shaping our relationship behaviors. They emphasize the term like-mindedness in the sense of shared generative drives instead of common interests, shattering stereotypical pairings like musician with musician. Rather, they suggest exploring compatibility in partners based on their generative drive, highlighting the significance of the context, the underlying intention, and the overall propensity to be generative. Delving deeper into the conversation, Drs. Huberman and Conti highlight an uncomfortable subject, trauma bonds. The idea of bonding through shared or similar traumatic experiences is often perceived negatively, but does it have to be? The doctors argue that the negativity associated with trauma bonds is not necessarily about the trauma itself, but rather about an imbalance in the generative drives of the individuals involved. Looking through this generative lens, if two people are hindered by similar traumas, sparking avoidance or discomfort, they could bond over their shared experiences. However, the outcome of this bond, whether it exacerbates their trauma and isolate them further, or helps them to harness their generative drives to attain a healthier state, rests largely on the way they approach their shared experiences as well as their individual drives. Take an example where two people share a trauma that induces significant social avoidance, to the point it prevents them from visiting a museum they both want to visit, a classic avoidant behavior. If they approach their trauma bond from a place of self-improvement with the goal of individual and mutual health, they could leverage the bond to step beyond their comfort zones, go to the museum, and in essence, face their fears together. Dr. Conti emphasizes the importance of communication in this context based on a deep understanding of the self, the other, and the collective. When people have high generative drives, they're often more capable of self-inquiry and asking the right questions, ultimately fostering a more profound understanding of themselves and their partner. However, mismatches in generative drives and subsequent communication struggles can lead to ingrained problems in relationships. As an example, discrepancies in sexual drives within a couple can create friction, often causing one partner to feel inadequate or pressurized, and the other to feel like their desires are being ignored or unmet. Yet stepping back and viewing the situation through the lens of generative drive, they can discuss their feelings openly without blaming each other. Ultimately, it all circles back to agency and gratitude. As generative drives enable people to feel more secure and self-assured, it cuts through conflicts and misunderstandings. It promotes a more substantial, healthier bond where both individuals feel appreciated and are willing to compromise. Dr. Conti sums it up. Let's define our relationships through the generative drive and cultivate in self and others the most generative drive. In the continued exploration of generative drives, pleasure drives, and aggressive or proactiveness drives in relationships, Drs. Huberman and Conti delve specifically into the role of these drives in romantic partnerships. The compatibility of these drives among partners can significantly determine the course and the outcomes of their relationships. Unpacking the scenario of one partner having a high sexual drive while the other has a weaker drive, Dr. Conti suggests that the partner with the low sexual drive could potentially increase their generative drive by recognizing the potential of their relationship improving if they can raise their sexual drive, while the partner with the high drive can consider if they might be overlooking other elements of compatibility in their pursuit of pleasure. Delving into the aspect of avoidance and how it potentially plays out in relationships, the doctors elucidate that a person might come across elements like shame, societal pressures, or trauma that make them avoid certain behaviors or feelings. Recognizing these avoidance patterns can help individuals address the underlying issues and gradually alter them. This process often involves revisiting the pillars of the self, understanding the structure and functions of oneself to gain insight about conscious and unconscious behaviors and beliefs, and getting to the root of these avoidance patterns. Dr. Conti underscores that if a person understands their avoidance and works through their barriers, they can harness their generative pleasure and aggressive drives more effectively. This acquired agency and ensuing gratitude not only enrich their self-perception, but also reinforce their relationship, supporting a healthier and more satisfying bond. Highlighting the significance of the independent map formed in a relationship, the doctors hint at common pairings observed in a clinical setting. Some may have healthy maps coming together, yet the outcome of these couplings often heavily depends upon their drive's compatibility and how well they manage their paired maps. By recognizing and understanding their drives and the subsequent dynamics, individuals can enhance their emotional intelligence, paving the way for more gratifying relationships. The discussion continues as Dr. Huberman and Dr. Conti examine patterns in unhealthy relationships. Amongst these patterns, repetition compulsion emerges as a critical factor. This concept elucidates why some individuals repetitively find themselves in similar detrimental relationships, effectively reproducing the same outcomes with different partners. The essence of these patterns lies in a person's innate desire to rectify past experiences or traumas. Thus, the cycle goes on, landing the person in similar situations repeatedly with an instinctive urge to make it right this time. Dr. Conti points out a profound factor, the powerful influence of trauma on our emotional limbic system. Trauma does not lose its impact over time and often triggers shame, making past experiences feel very immediate in the present. Hence, a person would strive to rectify these past wounds by tackling similar situations again, aiming to achieve a better outcome, and thus healing the past trauma in their minds. An interesting point raised during the conversation is the recurrent unsuccessful pairings where one side goes against their judgment, risking their well-being to ensure their partner doesn't leave. Here, the term attachment insecurity works its way into the discussion, pointing to an individual's innate worry about losing their attachment with someone close. Consequently, they might end up enforcing excessive control, giving up parts of themselves, resulting in a compromise of their identity and self-development. The dynamics of the relationship between narcissistic personalities and their partners further elaborate complex coupling patterns. People with narcissistic character structures are exploitative, driven by profound vulnerability and need. They often attract individuals who bear significant problems like pathological dependence, resulting in dysfunctional relationships. Nevertheless, Dr. Conti stresses that such problems are treatable, highlighting the importance of mental health awareness and intervention. He also notes that while abusive relationships are at the extreme end of the spectrum, the less dramatic version of repeated patterns, though less life-threatening, are as consequential to the individuals involved. For example, a person constantly being more deferential in their relationship can slowly erode their sense of identity and self-worth over time. Overall, understanding these patterns, be it the repetition compulsion, attachment insecurity, or narcissistic relationships, could provide individuals with the insight needed to break free from unhealthy cycles and recognize more satisfying relationship pathways. As the discussion between Dr. Andrew Huberman and Dr. Paul Conti continues, they delve into the mechanisms underlying toxic relationships. They explore numerous layers of how imbalanced power dynamics, oppressive behaviors, and strategic isolation can lead to situations where one party feels trapped. They tackle the concept of internal darkness, Here, the oppressor operates with envy as a motivator, pressuring their partner to live in the darkness of demoralization, depriving them of agency and gratitude, making them think they are not worth any better. The oppressor might use denigration as their weapon, leading to the oppressed person's reduction of a sense of self and proactive aggression, thus contributing to their feeling of demoralization. However, the conversation also brings hope. Both hosts share examples of dramatic change where oppressors have transformed their behavior and attitudes significantly upon understanding their issues at their core. They also stress the importance of community support systems and societal resources, which can be the lifelines people need to escape such oppressive situations. Apart from romantic relationships, power dynamics can also play out in workplace environments or within academic laboratories where the demand for work often exceeds human capacity. Here, people in power may create pressure cooker situations that undermine their colleagues' safety and sense of well-being. Often victims feel stuck because the systems in place have failed to offer any accountability. This can captivate people in a cycle of overwork and stress they feel unable to leave because of fear of having no other options. Both Dr. Huberman and Dr. Conti highlight the necessity for reasonable and rational accountability in closed systems to prevent oppressive situations. They refer to systems of people rather than individual relationships, each having a unique personality and environment. This necessitates an understanding that the comprehensive knowledge of each individual within a system doesn't give a complete understanding of the entire system. The key is to maintain a balanced sense of control without resorting to over-control or under-control, and to ensure channels for accountability to prevent breeding oppression. In an unabridged journey into the depths of the human psyche, Dr. Andrew Huberman and Dr. Paul Conti explore even more profound aspects of power dynamics, touching not just on toxic relationships, but also on the concept of envy. They suggest that envy is not merely a desire to be like someone else, but a much more sinister force in interpersonal dynamics, a destructive mechanism that's about bringing others down to feel better about oneself. Envy comes at that problem from the perspective that bringing down the other person is just as effective as bringing up the self, they explain. Moreover, this destructive quality of envy can be found predominantly in individuals with narcissistic character structures, contributing significantly to most of the damage seen in human interactions. Dr. Paul states that small percentage who are narcissistic does most of the damage on Earth. Transcending the scope of interpersonal relationships, they talk about the power dynamics in various contexts, such as the workplace. They scrutinize both overt and covert power dynamics, highlighting that an essential part of understanding power is recognizing the unstated or implicit dynamics in operation. They underscore the significance of give and take as a signal of healthy power dynamics, reflecting a balanced relationship. A healthy exchange doesn't always refer to a one-to-one correspondence, but points to an overall sense of shared connection, interaction, and respect between individuals. Drawing upon real-life experiences, the conversation propels into the positive aspects of relationships characterized by generative drive. The generative drive promotes a healthier expression of giving, creating a beneficial loop of reciprocity. In essence, rather than looking at power dynamics as a simple one-sided exchange, these thought leaders invite audiences to perceive them as complex, nuanced interactions, thereby enabling a deeper understanding of our relationships. The podcast offers a window into the nuances of power dynamics, illustrating the various forms of covert and overt manipulation individuals may face. The discussion is layered, enlightening, and offers an insightful exploration into the human psyche, relationships, and the subtle forces shaping our interactions. As Dr. Andrew Huberman and Dr. Paul Conti continue their insightful discussion, they bring attention to the concept of generosity. An interesting theme arises where high-profile individuals engaging in constant giving are found to be not only happier but also more successful. This idea serves as a counterbalance to the popular belief that most successful individuals are takers. Both doctors nods to the importance of a balanced exchange of give and take in the maintenance of a healthy relationship. However, they suggest a shift into considering these dynamics as a part of a wider generative cycle. This cycle, according to them, is elementally non-transactional. Instead of focusing only on the I in the relationship, they recommend expanding our concept to include the we. underscoring the collective happiness and beneficial atmosphere that a genuinely giving relationship can produce. Dr. Paul Conti explains how miserably inadequate the idea of human interactions being merely transactional feels, pointing out how it denies the inherent humanness of our connections. From caring for children to interacting with animals, there is an aspect of our nature that isn't merely about give and take, but about forming meaningful and emotional bonds. Moreover, they delve into more intricate examples of power dynamics in relationships, distinctly family-centered ones. Dr. Conti elaborates on the nonetheless transactional tasks that exist within a family, yet he focuses on the fact that these actions are based on much deeper emotional ties that go beyond mere exchange. What truly sustains these interactions is the generative aspect that's formed when two individuals come together and create a family, a setup that's simultaneously symbiotic and enriching. A highlight of the discussion becomes the doctor's return to the simplicity of lessons learned in kindergarten. By going back to basics, they remind us of the need to re-embrace the simplicity, kindness, and giving nature inherent in young children, accentuating how these simple acts can create a generative atmosphere. In examining what hinders these positive interactions, anxiety surfaces as a major factor. The discussion illuminates that fear or stress can cause individuals to shy away from addressing concerns or making requests, which in turn can undermine the potential for a healthy, balanced, and generative relationship. In the middle of their discussion, Dr. Huberman and Dr. Conti dive deeper into understanding the role of anxiety in relationships and human interactions. Anxiety, they clarify, is not a flaw, but an inherent part of our beings. They point out that even a person with seemingly no anxiety would be closer to a mannequin than a human. We all experience tension or discomfort at some level. However, the problem starts when this anxiety overshadows our ability to perceive and respond to our surroundings. They discuss the balancing act required in managing anxiety. Too little could suppress our motivation and drive to influence change in our world or personal life. On the other hand, a high degree of anxiety can constrict our cognitive function and prevent us from processing situations effectively. Dr. Conti helps us understand that anxiety is not an independent entity. It's deeply tied to the self. In a relationship, for example, if one person is constantly asking their partner if everything's okay, it's likely that the questioner's anxiety levels are sky high. In such cases, the first step to managing anxiety is stepping back and looking within. In an era where we are constantly online and immediate responses are often expected, anxiety finds a new playground. A simple action like not instantly replying to a text message can trigger anxiety and suspicion, damaging relationships, and the overall mental well-being of an individual. The doctors emphasize the importance of introspecting and understanding whether our yearning for immediate responses stems from our anxiety or from unfulfilled expectations. As they navigate through the complexities of these emotions, they explore the mechanisms of motivation and demoralization, encouraging listeners to sense their drives and pursue change grounded in understanding. With the acknowledgement of anxiety as a central part of our psyches, our hosts challenge their listeners. Are you ready to confront your anxiety, understand it, manage it, and use it to drive positive change, not just in your relationships, but in your lives overall? The topic then evolves to the concept of us. They underscore the need to understand ourselves first before extending to understanding the us in our relationships. With valuable insights on the dynamics of relationships and human interaction, the doctors delve into how shared bonds in a relationship tend to alleviate anxieties, build confidence, and ultimately create a lasting positive impact on each person's life, both for the individual I's and for the collective us. Throughout the discussion, the doctors urge the listeners to continuously introspect and understand the motives behind their feelings and actions. They put forward an important question: are we focusing too much on our own feelings, or are we actually understanding the other person's? In simple terms, are we stepping into their shoes and empathizing with them? Furthermore, it shaped a more profound definition and understanding of the you, me, and us spectrum in relationships. By consistently looking inward, questioning fears, identifying sources of anxiety, and empathizing with others, we can build a healthier, positive us. In their deep dive into understanding human structural and social dynamics, Dr. Andrew Huberman and Dr. Paul Conti discuss various aspects of self-awareness, empathy, and the importance of introspection for effective communication. They explore the concept of mentalization, or the ability to understand the mental state of oneself and others that underlies overt behavior. Lack of this ability, they suggest, can often lead to misunderstandings or conflicts. Rather than immediately assigning blame to the other person, the doctors advocate for a process of inward reflection, asking questions like, is it me, is it you, or is it us, to help discern the root of the issue. They also touch on the nuances of mental defense mechanisms and how these can distort our perspectives of ourselves and others. They contend that our unconscious mind is continuously processing such interactions, shaping our worldview and reactions. The discussion explores the impact of mentalization on our relationships. Misunderstandings and conflicts, they argue, are often results of our failure to mentalize and empathize with the other person. Truly understanding another person's feelings and intentions requires us to first understand and be in tune with our own state of mind. When anxiety or fear clouds our inner selves, our perception of others can become distorted. Dr. Conti emphasizes the need to cultivate and maintain boundaries in relationships. He defines healthy boundaries as those that start within and project outward. It's about understanding and respecting our own comfort zones while also acknowledging the space and needs of others. Further, they discuss the concept of a generative drive, which suggests individuals are innately inclined to create and maintain positive relationships. A disturbance in this drive, they suggest, can lead to defensiveness or aggression. This extensive discourse ultimately underscores the importance of internal clarity, mentalization, empathy, and understanding one's own triggers in managing interpersonal relationships effectively. The more self-aware we are, the better equipped we are to navigate our interactions, align with others, and build healthier connections. Doctors Huberman and Conti further delve into the pitfalls when we neglect self-awareness, pushing us into the territory of miscommunication and misunderstanding. In order to communicate effectively, we need to have a clear understanding of our own mental state, particularly when we're in an emotionally charged or heightened state. Recognizing when we are not in the right frame of mind to have a constructive conversation and asking for time could prevent conflicts and miscommunication. They propose that the mentalization approach, which involves starting with introspection before considering the other person and then the relationship, is an effective framework for conflict resolution. Reinforcing the importance of self-understanding, Dr. Conti suggests that losing sight of our own map can lead us astray, causing us to lose objectivity and latch onto unhealthy perspectives. Dr. Huberman keenly observes that when one loses sight of their own fragile map, it becomes easy to latch onto an equally distorted map of someone else. This often leads to shared misunderstanding, straying from clear communication and understanding. Ironically, our broken compass finds resonance with someone else's broken compass, leading us further away from accurate understanding. The conversation moves towards the discussion of labels, which offers only a superficial understanding of an individual or a situation. Labels are not a substitute for real understanding, which comes from looking inward, engaging in self-inquiry, bolstering agency, gratitude, and clear mentalization, leading to the strengthening of generative drive. The doctors also emphasize how mapping our personal attributes can indicate the course we instinctively take in life, recognizing the paths that go through a swamp and the ones that offer safe passage. A deeper self-understanding makes the map clearer, defining a healthier route and solidifying the effectiveness of the introspective approach they advocate for. Talking about relationships, the doctors agree that it is not just about finding someone healthy, but rather about recognizing and addressing our own traumas and building healthier versions of ourselves. As Dr. Conti points out, it's about doing work on ourselves, and as a result, our maps become clearer, guiding us towards what we want and aligning us with people who are doing the same kind of work with their own maps. Finally, they emphasize that this focus on self-understanding and mapping is not meant as a full-time job, but rather a way to engage more fully and effectively with the world and individuals around us. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.